Hello, it's me, the galaxy's younger brother. I want to tell you about Batman. When I was a kid, what I really liked about Batman was Robin. The Boy Wonder was the obvious draw of the series. He got to play with all of Batman's cool toys, hang out in the cave, but he also got to be funny. So when I got to pick out my first Batman movie on DVD, which also had to be from the $5 bin, I picked the only one that had Robin in the title. Joel Schumacher's Batman and Robin, the dying gasp of the movie series started by Tim Burton's Batman. That movie spent more time spinning in my DVD player than my DVD player has spent plugged in since 2012. But it wasn't a smart movie to rep. When I talked to my then new friend Christian about the movie, he sat me down and quietly whispered to me not to speak the movie's name too loudly, then showed me the review by the Nostalgia Critic. This was, of course, embarrassing. The internet said that anybody who had failed to notice that the movie was bad was either a complete moron or a child. I, being both, was horrified to realize that you weren't supposed to let people know you were those things. So I began my long journey of figuring out what made movies good and bad. I'm not exaggerating the role that this movie played in getting me into film criticism. I remember making a video when I was like 14 years old about how every movie that I had ever made was worse than the worst movie of all time, Batman and Robin. I just thought way too much about it. But some movies that are that bad eventually hit a point where every single bad thing has been said about them. In fact, hearing about how bad the movie was will become a little annoying at certain points. So people start to avoid talking about it, and when they do, to avoid saying those annoying, repetitive bad things, they start saying good things. Which leads me to my title question. It seemed like a perfect candidate. Not only was it a really bad movie, but it was something that we all discovered was bad together. But it also seems like to defend it just to be contrarian would be a little bit just inauthentic. Batman and Robin already got way more of an audience than it deserved by being attached to a popular character and film franchise. Why give it another shot by suggesting people go watch it again? If I had a secret cave hidden behind a grandfather clock, that's where I would take you right now to start the video. I don't. Let's just get started. Up until recently, if you found a review for Batman and Robin online, you knew you were probably in for a laugh. Some people believe the internet was just created to catalog every joke and insult that could be thrown at the movie Batman and Robin, and that when it's finally completed its task, it will just shut down. If you're skeptical about something with that reputation making a comeback, the Star Wars prequels.
Hello there.
For about 10 years after the prequels came out, if you said you liked them, you had it carefully explained to you why you didn't. Then, all of a sudden, in 2015, people started explaining to you why actually you did like it. I wanted to look into them real quick just because I think a good map for how they've been received over the years might lead us into how we might see Batman and Robin get received. Even though the prequels do come out after Batman and Robin, it is also fair to say they didn't have as bad a reputation. All that basically saying that, it makes sense that the prequels would get reconsidered sooner. In my research, I found Emma Stefansky's Everyone Likes the Star Wars Prequels Now on Thrillist. She noted how the prequels' strange dialogue made the movie easy to quote and remember, and how there was a good base story there. Batman and Robin definitely had quotable dialogue. I am less confident in the story. But the point that stuck with me most was how she praised the notion of having a vision, because it felt unique in the era of micro and macro managed blockbuster franchises, which are immediately forgettable. Modern blockbusters kind of gave us this monkey paw style wish, wherein we got more say in what happened with the franchises we loved via the internet. But it came at the cost of one person ever being able to give a single vision for a property ever again. And once we started becoming encumbered with a lot of these movies that were sort of determined by a boardroom or audience reaction, we started missing those weird, unique visions. A lot of people were more willing to look back at movies like the Star Wars prequels and go, but I see what the director was going for. The other thing that made this relevant to the conversation about Batman and Robin was how Stefansky points to the kind of cultural saturation that only comes around once in a while. It's one thing to think a movie is bad, it's a completely different thing to have everybody you know also think that movie is bad. I think that's why a lot of times, a lot of the films that are underrated are the ones that actually did get an audience, they just didn't get a good reaction. You could go find an obscure bad movie and then analyze it for its positive traits and then make your friends sit down and watch it and then defend the movie to them, but they wouldn't want to watch another movie with you. But not only did everybody know that the prequels were bad, everybody talked about it everywhere. At the store, over your morning cup of coffee, with your mom or dad or pets. And Batman and Robin was a similar case. It was dead on arrival, mocked for years by the internet, and then a dormant conversation. Then you start seeing it on stray Reddit threads and YouTube comment sections, on TikToks, that opinion that, I think Batman and Robin might be able to go to Yale? It's genius. So, is the movie defensible? Of course it is. I'm not saying that it's obviously good in some way, but you can sit down and have fun with it, and then you can explain why you did so. It could technically be fun. The best kind of fun. Removed entirely from the context of the Batman franchise at the time, this movie does establish itself very quickly as a campy superhero movie. The action is over the top, the set pieces are complicated and colorful, it feels like reading a very specific kind of comic book.
Batman and Robin clearly was all about the Batman of the 60s in the comic books. So I think that a fan's perspective or an audience's perspective on these movies is different depending on what age group they are in and what type of Batman comics they grew up reading.
Plus, if you like seeing all of Batman's toys in full glory, they're there. Dialogue and characterization were obviously not a big focus for the director, which is an interesting choice for a movie, but George Clooney, Chris O'Donnell, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Uma Thurman still find interesting things to do with the material. The only problem I really had with the movie was sometimes it leaned on being campy to cut corners. Trying to relate to these characters was a little bit hard when their dialogue was still just as campy in the dramatic scenes as it is in the action scenes, but the movie is taking the dramatic scenes way more seriously, so the camera is just like treating it like a normal drama, and it's like, but I'm Robin. I wanna be Robin! Plus, the one-liners are constant. Like, constant. Although, if you release this movie today, I bet I could make a good pitch for this being, mockery of the Marvel speak that has been going around for, the last decade now. 2 decades. Oh my gosh, 2 decades. But the movie has a lot of rough patches. Unlike the Star Wars prequels, where a lot of the issues were actually from Lucas himself, this movie was actually weighed down more by the studios interfering.
And it did seem like the audience and the media and the studio, everybody wanted me to do another one. Now, of course, everyone wanted to be involved. This was, how can we stop everybody? It was everybody and their mother wanted to have their franchise in the movie and be part of it, and it was a very, very different experience.
A time crunch was put on Batman and Robin to be finished because its predecessor, Batman Forever, did so well at the box office. Batman Forever being successful was attributed to its lighter tone, so studios wanted another light Batman movie quick. And not only was the studio itself steering the movie in a certain direction, but it was actually letting the toy companies come in and have direct say on the movie.
Batman and Robin, there was a real desire at the studio to keep it more family-friendly, more kid-friendly. And a word I had never heard before, more toyetic, which means that what you create makes toys that can sell.
We involved the toy company. We let them look and be involved in how the Batmobile was going to look, how Batman's gadgets were going to be, which they wanted. This is key to them. They need a lot of lead time.
In the end, it makes me interested in what we would have gotten if Schumacher had been time to develop an actual proper homage to the 60s TV series, and he got the time and resources to do so, and he didn't have to answer to a toy company. Because I get what people are saying, and the story that Batman and Robin are having a fight because Robin wants more independence has worked a ton in the comics. And Schumacher also included Batgirl. I was really excited to see that. Alicia Silverstone plays the role really well, and I have a very distinct memory of her discovering the Batcave and her suit and all that. That's the thing about the movie that I always remembered, and so it just has a very special place with me, and I think she does well with what she was given, even if her character arc is the most confusing one in the movie. Even though I wouldn't teach it to a film class or anything, I have fun when I watch Batman and Robin. Although, I also loved Power Rangers growing up, so do with that what you will. But when the film first released, a scout alien ship was en route to make first contact. It stopped and turned around because it heard a chorus of booing from space. I double-checked Wikipedia real quick just to make sure I wasn't forgetting or misremembering the fact that the film was dead on release. I, for some reason, convinced myself that maybe people liked it enough at the time and only disliked it later. No, it was exactly as poorly received as I remembered. And it's how I found out that Kevin Feige attributed the increase of quality in superhero movies to this film being so bad. And critics pretty quickly understood that it was more in line with the 60s TV show than the previous movies. They just didn't like that as an excuse for focusing on special effects over character. In the coming years, as the internet grew, the film's reputation was solidified. Doug Walker's review of it as the Nostalgia Critic is the one that I first saw, and it was very popular online because of his over-the-top anger at the film and the resulting jokes. It was a fun review because the way that he took you through the movie made you feel like you were watching a bad movie with friends. And Batman and Robin kind of became the bad movie the entire internet could be a friend over. It became the benchmark for bad movies. For a long time, Joel Schumacher and George Clooney were just going around apologizing for the film, and it seemed like we may never forgive them.
Didn't you apologize to the crowd at Comic-Con for Batman and Robin?
I always apologize for Batman. Let me just say that I actually thought I destroyed the franchise until they brought it back. You know, somebody else brought it back years later and changed it. But, you know, I thought at the time this was going to be a very good career move. It wasn't.
If there's anybody watching this that, let's say, loved Batman Forever and went into Batman and Robin with great anticipation, if I disappointed them in any way, then I really want to apologize, because it wasn't my intention. My intention was just to entertain them.
But we kept making fun of Batman and Robin, because I think once the initial criticism was sorted, it was just fun to be in on the joke. There were a number of reasons why, at the time, the film was considered as bad as it was, besides the stuff I've already mentioned. For starters, it was still kind of a risk to make a campy Batman movie so soon after the TV series. Batman and Robin was technically the third sequel to the Batman film by Tim Burton, and that movie was one of the Batman stories that was credited for popularizing the dark interpretation of Batman. Batman Forever did do well in response to the darker tone of its predecessor, but I don't think deciding to slam the gas on the Bat-DeLorean back to campy Batman was the solution here. We already had Batman the Animated Series, and it was wildly popular at this point. Granted, it was a cartoon, so I guess, I don't know, I'm not gonna say that DC's always been good at figuring out what to do. And to be fair, it's easier to make the claim now that it wasn't a good time for a sillier Batman, knowing how popular Christopher Nolan's Batman movies would become. People just felt disappointed by Batman and Robin. It wasn't just bad, it was a dropped ball. It would probably be easier to forget today because we just wait a week or two for the next Batman movie. But for a while, people thought that this movie snuffed out the Batman franchise forever. They bowed to the studio and the toy company, and they lost the story. I think that's part of the reason why people are reconsidering it now. It didn't kill the franchise, and in fact, we've had so much dark Batman over the years that now people are asking for a more lighthearted take again. And as a result of being willing to take on a more campy Batman, they're willing to see what Joel Schumacher was going for and excuse some of the things that happened because of a result of the studios. To clarify, I don't think that everybody thinks that this movie is good now. I'm pretty positive that if you bumped into somebody on the street and asked them whether or not they liked Batman and Robin, and they remembered the movie, they would probably look at you like you had just asked them whether or not they liked the death of their grandmother. I'm just saying that before the rise of superhero movies, you never saw anyone dare to call this movie passable. And now saying that there's something good there is one of those unpopular opinions that's getting more and more popular over time. And a bunch of the articles that I read defending the film in recent years brought up really good points. James Harvey wrote Batman and Robin, Finding the Good in an Infamous 1997 Superhero Movie for filmstories.co.uk. Harvey acknowledged the backlash the films received and how Schumacher and Clooney had apologized, but points out that the fault lies more in the fact that the film was born, built, and died as a toy commercial, a blatant money printing exercise ordered by studio execs. It was an important note because a lot of the conversation surrounding the film had just been poking fun at the story itself. It was probably easy for the director and the star to feel like they were the reason the movie was bad, even though we all knew that the studio put them on a time crunch and in a toy box. Harvey compares this one-off kind of badness to when modern superhero movies are bad, and the audience still knows we'll be bombarded with them on a monthly basis. Harvey's article was less about pointing out how the film was pure uncut cinema, and more about pointing out how it's an interesting comparison point for what's changed in these cash grabs, and how much more willing we are to accept certain things. Nick Buckley wrote Batman and Robin, time to revisit Joel Schumacher's maligned, silly, and endlessly quotable film for The Guardian. Buckley got to his point quickly, claiming Batman and Robin to be easily more entertaining than Christopher Nolan's feted Batman trilogy, but quickly revealing the perspective he's coming from by introducing it as a source of teenage mania among my early 2000s high school friends. Buckley's take pointed out it was more reminiscent of the 60s TV show and Silver Age comics, and praised the villains as a morally complex climate change allegory in which two visionary scientists attempt to save the planet from the relentlessly destructive capitalism of billionaire psychopaths like George Clooney's Bruce Wayne. When I first read that, I double-checked to make sure that the article wasn't written on April Fool's Day. But it's a take that makes sense when you consider why Buckley asked his audience to reconsider the movie. Batman and Robin and its wild cultural byproducts were a big memory for him, and a big source of entertainment for him and his friends when they used to hole up in rooms in their houses. Batman and Robin was insane, and it gave friends who watched it together endless opportunities to spiral out on details. I don't think the cast and crew set out to make an environmental allegory, but there's grounds for a fun conversation there. And it's an interesting pitch because it's not far off from what we were already doing. It's basically saying, yeah, it's crazy, we should love it for that. But, we get to do the same thing, which is all talk about how crazy it is. That brings me to my overall point. I've seen a ton of people in a ton of online spaces saying that we should be nicer to Batman and Robin, but the reason that I picked those specific two articles were because they both were out to accomplish the same goal, but they took wildly different approaches to do so. But they were both trying to show us the movie through a different lens, find a way that they saw to look at it that they could share with us. Batman and Robin probably doesn't deserve a genuine critical reevaluation, especially when we have tons of other movies that were dismissed as bad and never seen again. But tons of people have seen Batman and Robin and are beginning to remember it fondly. And I think that if people have a story about what they liked about an old film, or what they noticed, or how they made fun of it with their friends, then it's something that I would like to hear about. We've kind of reached a period with video essays where it's a very oversaturated market, and people are beginning to question whether or not we need this many people trying to find every angle on a movie that they can. And I could see the point. I mean, maybe we don't need to all be pitching to everybody all the time, that we should all be listening to every single video, and we all need to watch videos in order to understand the point. That's, it is a little bit ridiculous to think that every single video essay has something important to say about a movie. I guess I just never really think about my videos in terms of whether or not they're necessary to the grander public. A lot of times they start as takes that I want to explain to one of my sisters, or one of my friends, or Northtooth, the wizard troll. And I'll make the video trying to explain the subject to them specifically. Making videos with more of the idea that I'm just trying to exchange them to my friends or family kept me focused less on what has already been said, and more on what I wanted to say. And that's where I think I land on the question, should someone defend Batman and Robin? We shouldn't try too hard just to say everything about the movie, or make every opinion out there available, but if you watch it and you genuinely think something about it that you think is interesting, or that you think someone might want to hear, then I don't think there's any better time than now to be making videos about it. And I like the idea that people might take on more bad movies as time goes on. It's always really weird to see a movie just be so bad that everyone agrees it's bad. It's fun and it's funny, but it's also, it sucks, especially when you were excited for something. And then you wait, 10 years, and somebody has pitched it to you in a brand new way, and it doesn't fix the movie, but it makes it kind of nice to me. As long as you don't go around making videos about whether or not people should make videos about stuff, you should be fine.